When someone hears something about themselves, it tends to stick. In addition to being a pastor, I've also been a violin teacher for a long time. This one time I had a transfer student who came to me with a lot of technique problems, and the student told me, matter of factly, that her previous teacher had said she must have a coordination problem. Now, she had a lot of things that needed to be fixed, but she was doing just fine. And after a few months, she was sounding good, and she looked like a violinist with the relaxed posture and ease of playing that a teacher wants to see in any student. She most definitely did not have a coordination problem, whatever that is. In 25 years of teaching, by the way, I have never actually had a student with a coordination problem that prevented them from playing. But after just a few months of solid progress, the student abruptly told me that she had decided to quit and switch to French horn, an equally difficult instrument, by the way, if you ask any French horn player. What she'd been told by her other teacher, that she had a coordination problem, that there was something wrong with her that prevented her from playing violin, that stuck. And no amount of evidence of her own hard work and progress, ease of playing, and beautiful sound could convince her otherwise. Now, I'm a Suzuki teacher, and one of the core points of the Suzuki philosophy is that every child can play. Not every child will want to play. Not every child will have the drive to practice in the kinds of ways that lead to a life of professional music, but every child can learn how to play, just as children learn how to speak. So when there's a problem with learning, we don't look for some inherent flaw in the child. We look for what can be improved in the learning environment. We look at how the teacher is teaching the child. We look at how the parent is practicing with the child and whether practicing is happening consistently. We don't blame the child. So I knew that this child didn't have a coordination problem. She had a teacher problem. Instead of looking at the whole situation and allowing for the possibility that perhaps it was the teacher who needed to approach things in a different way, this teacher instead chose to blame the student. When someone hears something about themselves, it tends to stick. Now, imagine you've just moved, you're brand new, and you've just gotten involved in a church community that seems super friendly and welcoming. You've been there long enough to make a few friends. Maybe you've gotten comfortable enough that you've exchanged phone numbers with some of these people and started texting. Maybe you've met for coffee a few times. And then your church friends find something out about you that is part of who you are, but that they've decided means you can be tolerated at best, or at worst, kicked out. You get ghosted. No one wants to meet up with you anymore. And your pastor says, I just can't agree with your lifestyle. Or worse, your friends or even your pastor tell you that you can't be a Christian and also be who you are. It's devastating, especially when that's the experience someone is having in a church they thought was going to welcome them. Maybe they thought it would have more modern sensibilities because of the contemporary music, or maybe the church itself tried to rainbow wash, that is, use rainbow colors on its advertising materials and words that might make someone think it was inclusive. Or perhaps the church thinks it actually is welcoming, mistaking mere tolerance for full inclusion. For some of the students I encounter in campus ministry, this devastation is their very first experience with the church. And if that first experience is devastating, we have to ask ourselves, why on earth would they ever want to try again? Why on earth would they ever trust a church again? Why wouldn't they just walk away believing, like my violin student, that there's something about them that just can't fit here? And there are some who will argue that it's okay to be a part of those communities if you fit a certain definition of being part of the in an accepted group. But I would argue that it does something to you to be part of a community that defines itself based on who is out. It does something to you to look at your neighbors as less than. And I have yet to find an example of Jesus telling us to look down on our neighbors, to close ourselves off, to round ourselves up into neat little clubs. In today's gospel, Jesus proclaims that he is the gate of all things. But what is the purpose of a gate? It's a boundary. But if Jesus is the gate, then Jesus is the one and only gatekeeper, the one who gets to decide whether the gate is open or closed and for whom. And here, Jesus is saying that there will be some folks who want to be in charge of it, of saying who gets to come out or in, but that they don't really get to be. In other words, there are those who would try to tell you that you're not allowed to come through this gate. There are those who would tell you that you don't belong or that God doesn't want you here, but they're denying the very promise that Jesus gives us. Jesus is the gate that can't be kept by anyone else. Our society is in a crisis of trust these days, and so is the church. There's an awful lot of misinformation circulating in faith communities that you're not good enough, that your skin isn't the right color, that you're damaged goods, that you don't love the right person, and that therefore God could never love you for who you are. But if you've heard these words, you don't have a God problem. You've had a pastor problem. For those who have heard the voices of these thieves and bandits their whole lives, it can be hard to imagine what trusting the Good Shepherd could be like. If you've ever been told that something must be wrong with you, or that there's something about you that means you just don't belong here, Jesus has a very different response and a very consistent response. Jesus is the gate itself. He will care for you just as he cares for all of his flock, and he will rejoice when you are with him. Jesus is the one whose voice we should be following, and his words are the words that are trustworthy. Jesus knows that half a life is not an abundant life. And we are reminded in this text that Jesus came so that we might have life and have it abundantly. An abundant life comes by living fully into who God has created us to be, living our full lives in beloved community that celebrates who we are. What Jesus tells us throughout the Gospels is that we are beloved children of God, accompanied by the one who loves us. We are not here to define community based on who is out. We are not here to be merely tolerated, and we are not here to merely tolerate other people. We are here to care for each other faithfully as Jesus cares for us. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, finds us when we are lost, leads us when we cannot see the way forward, and invites us in when we're certain we don't belong. That is good news worth sharing. And it's good news that will never get old. Amen.